I never slept with him, but I fell for him.
You lied to me.
The spreadsheet on my laptop screen blurred as I rubbed my eyes, the numbers swimming together like tiny black ants. It was past midnight, and I'd been hunched over quarterly reports for the better part of 6 hours. Being a forensic accountant meant living in a world where every decimal point mattered, where lies hid behind carefully manipulated figures, and where the truth always surfaced if you knew where to look. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The front door clicked open, followed by the familiar sound of Naomi's heels against our hardwood floor. She was humming something off-key, that particular melody she always hummed when she'd had a few drinks at one of her corporate events. "Hey, babe," she called out, her voice carrying that slightly slurred edge that told me she definitely had more than her usual single glass of wine. "Still working? You're such a workaholic." I glanced up from my laptop as she appeared in the doorway of our home office, still wearing that black cocktail dress she'd put on for tonight's networking event. Her blonde hair was slightly mussed, lipstick faded, and there was something in her expression I couldn't quite place. Satisfaction, maybe, or guilt. "How was the event?" I asked, saving my work and closing the laptop. "Meet any interesting people?" Naomi kicked off her heels and padded over to where I sat, wrapping her arms around my shoulders from behind. The scent of wine and expensive perfume enveloped me, along with something else, a cologne I didn't recognize. "Oh, you know how these things are," she said, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. Same boring corporate types talking about quarterly projections and market penetration. Though Ethan was there, which made it more bearable. Ethan Shaw. The name that had been popping up in our conversations with increasing frequency over the past few months. Naomi's so-called work husband at Morrison & Associates, where she worked as a senior event planner. According to her, he was just a friend, a sales manager who happened to share her sense of humor and bought her lunch occasionally when they worked late on projects together. "Ethan again," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. "He seems to be at a lot of these events lately." "Well, he is in sales," Naomi replied, her arms tightening slightly around my shoulders. "It's literally his job to schmooze clients. Don't tell me you're jealous of my work husband, Felix. That would be adorable and completely ridiculous." There it was again. Work husband. The term that made my jaw clench every time she said it. I'd looked up Ethan Shaw on LinkedIn, of course. 35, divorced. The kind of guy who posted motivational quotes about crushing it and wore expensive suits that probably cost more than my monthly salary. In his profile picture, he had that practiced smile of someone who'd spent years perfecting the art of selling things to people who didn't need them. "Not jealous," I said, standing up and stretching. "Just curious. You mention him a lot." Naomi laughed, the sound just a little too bright, a little too forced. "Because we work together constantly, silly. Morrison has us collaborating on the Hartwell Industries account, remember? The one that could make or break my promotion?" I remembered. She'd been talking about the Hartwell account for weeks, how landing it successfully would finally get her that senior director position she'd been chasing. It was important to her. I knew that. Important enough that she'd been staying late at the office 3 nights a week. Important enough that she'd been glued to her phone during dinner, responding to what she claimed were urgent emails about venue logistics and catering requirements. "Right," I said. "The big account." We headed to our bedroom, going through the familiar routine of getting ready for bed. Naomi chatted about the evening while she removed her makeup, telling me about the stuffy executives and overpriced appetizers, but I found myself only half listening. Instead, I was watching her in the bathroom mirror, noting the way she avoided my eyes when she talked about the parts of the evening that included Ethan. As we settled into bed, Naomi's phone buzzed on her nightstand. She reached for it immediately, the screen illuminating her face in the darkness. "Work?" I asked. "Just Ethan," she said, typing a quick response. "He's thanking everyone for tonight. Such a gentleman." She set the phone face down on the nightstand, but not before I caught a glimpse of the message thread. The conversation was longer than a simple thank you would require, with multiple exchanges throughout the evening. Before I could get a better look, she'd turned away from me, pulling the covers up to her chin. "Good night, babe," she murmured. "Love you?" "Love you too," I replied automatically, but my mind was already racing. In my line of work, I'd learned to trust patterns. When numbers didn't add up, when explanations seemed just a little too convenient, when someone's story changed in small but significant ways over time. I'd built a career on following those instincts, on digging deeper when something felt off. And right now, everything about Naomi's behavior felt off. The late nights, the constant texting, The way she'd started dressing differently for work, more effort with her hair, new clothes that showed a little more skin than her usual professional wardrobe. She'd explained it all away as wanting to make a good impression for the promotion, but now I was wondering if there was another reason entirely. I lay awake long after Naomi's breathing had settled into the rhythm of sleep, staring at the ceiling and thinking about patterns, about the way she'd started putting her phone face down whenever I was around, about how she'd begun taking calls in the other room, claiming they were boring work conversations I wouldn't want to hear, about the new lingerie I'd found in her dresser drawer last week, still with the tags on, that she claimed she'd bought for herself because it made her feel confident. Nothing says love like a turkey wrap bought by a man who wears loafers without socks, I thought grimly. But maybe it wasn't about the turkey wraps at all. Maybe it was about something much more serious. The next morning, Naomi was up and out of the house before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. She claimed she had an early meeting with the Hartwell team, but when I'd mumbled something about grabbing breakfast together, she'd kissed my cheek and told me she'd probably just grab something at the office. "Ethan's bringing bagels for everyone," she'd said, applying lipstick in the hallway mirror. "He's so thoughtful that way." Of course he was. I spent the morning at my own office, trying to focus on a complex embezzlement case for a client, but my mind kept wandering back to Naomi's behavior. By lunch, I'd made a decision that probably crossed several lines in the trust department of our relationship, but I was past caring about those particular boundaries. I drove home during my lunch break, knowing Naomi would be at work for several more hours. Our brownstone apartment was quiet, filled with the kind of afternoon sunlight that usually made me feel peaceful. Today, it just made me feel like I was trespassing in my own home. Naomi's laptop was in our bedroom, plugged in on her side of the dresser where she always left it. She'd never been particularly secretive about her passwords. We'd shared them freely for years, used each other's devices interchangeably when one was out of reach. But as I opened the laptop and saw the login screen, I realized I was about to find out just how much that casual trust had changed. I tried her usual password first, Naomi Felix 2019, the year we'd moved in together. Invalid. I tried variations, our anniversary date, her birthday, her mother's maiden name. All invalid. Finally, on a hunch that made my stomach clench, I tried Ethan Naomi 2023. The desktop loaded immediately. For a moment, I just sat there staring at her familiar wallpaper. A photo of us from last summer's vacation to Cape Cod, both of us grinning at the camera with the ocean behind us. We looked happy. We looked like a couple with no secrets, no hidden passwords, no reason to doubt each other. I opened her browser history first, scrolling through the usual mix of work-related sites, online shopping, and social media. Nothing suspicious there, but then again, anyone smart enough to change their password would be smart enough to clear their browser history. Her email was more revealing. The work account was full of the expected project communications, client correspondence, and meeting invitations. But buried among the legitimate business emails were dozens of messages from Ethan Shaw, and the tone of them was far from professional. "Thanks for staying late to work on the presentation. You're amazing at this stuff, and at making even the boring parts fun. Can't wait for tomorrow's site visit. E. Loved your ideas about the venue layout. You have such a creative mind. Lunch tomorrow to discuss the catering options? I know a great place. E. Working with you has been the highlight of this whole project. You make everything better just by being there. E. Each email was signed with just his initial, like they were old friends sharing inside jokes. Naomi's responses were shorter, but equally warm, filled with smiley face emoticons and casual references to inside jokes I wasn't part of. She'd been deleting emails from Ethan regularly, but she'd apparently forgotten that deleted items don't actually disappear until you empty the folder. The messages there were more personal, more intimate. Compliments about her appearance, suggestions for drinks after work, and increasingly flirtatious banter that had nothing to do with event planning or client management. One email from 3 days ago made me grip the laptop so hard I was surprised the screen didn't crack. Naomi, can't stop thinking about our conversation yesterday. You're right that some things are complicated, but maybe complicated isn't always bad. Some of the best things in life are worth a little complexity. Looking forward to tonight's event. Save me a dance? E. Her response. Ethan, you always know exactly what to say. Yes to the dance, and yes to the conversation afterward. Some complications are definitely worth it. N. I sat back in the chair, my heart pounding. Tonight's event. That was the networking function she'd come home from last night, humming and smelling like unfamiliar cologne. The event where she danced with Ethan Shaw and had some kind of meaningful conversation afterward. But I wasn't done digging yet. Her phone records were accessible through our shared family plan account. 3 months of call logs and text message summaries painted a clear picture of increasing contact with Ethan's number. What had started as occasional work-related communications had evolved into daily phone calls, some lasting over an hour. Text messages sent at all hours, including several exchanges after midnight. The final piece of evidence was in a folder buried deep in her documents directory, labeled HL Project Notes, presumably for Hartwell Industries. But when I opened it, I found something that had nothing to do with corporate event planning, screenshots of text conversations with Ethan, photos of the two of them at various work events, standing closer together than colleagues typically would, and most damning of all, a selfie of them together that looked like it had been taken in a hotel room, both of them in casual clothes, Ethan's arm around her shoulders, both of them looking flushed and happy. The metadata on the photo showed it had been taken last Tuesday night, the same Tuesday when Naomi had told me she was working late on venue contracts and wouldn't be home until after 10. I closed the laptop and sat in the silence of our bedroom, surrounded by the life we'd built together. The framed photos of us on the dresser, the books we'd both read scattered on the nightstands, the laundry hamper full of our clothes mixed together. All of it suddenly felt like evidence of something that was already over, artifacts from a relationship that had ended without me even knowing it. My phone buzzed with a text message from Naomi. "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up for dinner. Love you." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "No problem. Love you too." But as I sent the reply, I was already formulating a plan. Because if there was one thing I'd learned from years of forensic accounting, it was that the truth always came out eventually. The only question was whether you waited for it to surface naturally or whether you helped it along, and I was definitely in the mood to help it along. I spent the rest of the week observing Naomi with new eyes, cataloging every lie, every excuse, every moment when she chose her phone over our conversation. It was like watching a magic trick once you knew how it worked, suddenly obvious, almost insulting in its transparency. Thursday night, she claimed she was having drinks with her girlfriends Claire and Monica. But when I casually mentioned it to Claire at the grocery store on Saturday, she looked confused. "Drinks? We haven't done girls' night in weeks," Claire said, adjusting her toddler in the shopping cart. "Naomi's been so busy with that big work project. We barely hear from her anymore." Friday, Naomi said she had to work through lunch to finish a presentation. But according to the credit card statement I checked that evening, she'd charged a meal for two at Romano's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, at 1:30 p.m. Romano's wasn't exactly the kind of place you went for a working lunch, especially not alone. By Sunday, I decided it was time to stop being a passive observer and start being an active participant in whatever game Naomi and Ethan thought they were playing. I started with research. Social media made it laughably easy to learn everything about Ethan Shaw's life, habits, and personality. His Instagram was a carefully curated collection of gym selfies, expensive dinners, and motivational quotes overlaid on sunset photos. His LinkedIn showed a career built on schmoozing and self-promotion, with recommendations from clients praising his relationship-building skills and personal attention to detail. But it was his Facebook that gave me the most useful information. Ethan Shaw was the kind of man who thought he was much cleverer than he actually was. He posted cryptic status updates about new opportunities and exciting developments that were clearly meant to intrigue his audience. He shared articles about successful entrepreneurs and tagged himself at expensive restaurants and exclusive events. Most importantly, he was active in several Boston-area professional networking groups, where he regularly posted advice and commentary that revealed his inflated sense of his own importance. I created a plan that would have made my forensic accounting professors proud. It was methodical, patient, and designed to let Ethan and Naomi's own behavior do most of the work for me. Step 1, documentation. I set up a separate email account and began forwarding myself copies of everything I found, the deleted emails, the photo metadata, the credit card statements, the phone records. I organized it all in a folder structure that would make sense to anyone who needed to review it later. Step 2, verification. I needed independent confirmation of what I suspected, so I hired a private investigator. It felt dramatic and slightly ridiculous, like something from a bad movie, but I wanted professional documentation of whatever was happening between my girlfriend and her work husband. The investigator, a middle-aged woman named Janet, who ran her business out of a small office above a sandwich shop, was refreshingly matter-of-fact about the whole thing. "Cheating spouse cases are about 60% of my business," she told me during our initial meeting. "You'd be surprised how many people think they're being subtle when they're actually broadcasting their affair to anyone who's paying attention." I gave her photos of both Naomi and Ethan, their work addresses, and the schedule of Naomi's supposed late nights and work events. Janet quoted me a rate that would put a decent dent in my savings account, but I figured it was a worthwhile investment in the truth. Step 3, preparation. I began setting up the infrastructure for what I was already thinking of as the reckoning. I researched Morrison & Associates' employee handbook and HR policies, particularly the sections about workplace relationships and professional conduct. I identified the key players in Naomi's social and professional circles, the people whose opinions mattered to her, whose approval she craved. Most importantly, I started spending time at the Ledger, a dive bar near downtown that served as an unofficial gathering place for Boston's white-collar workforce. It was the kind of place where administrative assistants gossiped about their bosses, where middle managers complained about their companies, and where rumors spread faster than wildfire. The regular crowd at the Ledger was a mix of cynical office workers and blue-collar guys who appreciated good whiskey and bad jokes. I'd never been much of a bar person, but I discovered I had a talent for listening to other people's problems and offering the kind of sardonic commentary that made me fit right in. "You know what I love about cheaters?" I said one evening, nursing a bourbon and listening to a guy named Mike complain about his ex-wife. "They always think they're so much smarter than everyone else, like they invented the concept of lying." "Ain't that the truth?" agreed Sarah, a legal secretary who'd become my unofficial guide to the bar's social dynamics. "I see it all the time at work. People having affairs, thinking nobody notices. Meanwhile, everyone from the janitor to the partners knows exactly what's going on." I was building relationships, establishing myself as someone people could trust with their secrets and their gossip. Because when the time came to share some gossip of my own, I wanted to make sure it reached the right ears. Step 4, the opening move. On Wednesday evening, while Naomi was at another late work session, I sent Ethan Shaw a message that would set everything in motion. I used a generic Hallmark card, the kind you could buy at any drugstore. Inside, I wrote in my neatest handwriting, "Dear Ethan, thank you for taking such good care of Naomi. Your attention to her needs is truly appreciated. She speaks about you constantly. Best regards, Felix Harper." I included a $50 Starbucks gift card and mailed it to his office address. The beauty of the message was its ambiguity. It could be interpreted as a sincere thank you from a grateful boyfriend or as a subtle threat from someone who knew more than he was letting on. Either way, it would make Ethan uncomfortable, force him to wonder exactly how much I knew and what I planned to do about it. I was betting that discomfort would make him sloppy, push him to make mistakes that would give me even more ammunition. On Thursday, Janet, the private investigator, called with her first report. "Your instincts were right," she said without preamble. "I've got photos of them together at 3 different locations over the past week. Hotel bar on Tuesday, that Italian place on Friday, and what looks like his apartment building on Sunday afternoon. The body language is pretty clear. This isn't a professional relationship." "How clear?" I asked. "Hand-holding, kissing, the works. I've got timestamps and GPS data for everything. If you need this documented for legal purposes, it'll hold up." Legal purposes. I hadn't been thinking that far ahead yet, but Janet's comment made me realize I should be. If Naomi and I were going to end, and it seemed inevitable that we were, I wanted to make sure I was protected financially and legally. "Send me everything," I told her, "and keep watching them. I have a feeling things are about to get more interesting." That evening, Naomi came home earlier than usual, looking distracted and slightly nervous. She was quieter than normal during dinner, checking her phone frequently and giving short answers to my attempts at conversation. "Everything okay?" I asked as we cleared the dishes. "You seem stressed." "Just work stuff," she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "The Hartwell project is getting complicated." "Complicated how?" She paused in loading the dishwasher, her hands gripping a plate tightly enough that I worried she might break it. "Just office politics. You know how it is. People making things more difficult than they need to be." I nodded sympathetically. "That's frustrating. Is Ethan helping you navigate it?" At the mention of his name, Naomi's shoulders tensed visibly. "He's doing what he can," she said carefully. "But some situations are just messy." "Well," I said, drying my hands on a dish towel and giving her my most supportive smile, "I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're good at handling messy situations." She looked at me then, really looked at me, as if she was trying to read something in my expression. "Thanks, babe," she said finally. "I hope you're right." As I watched her retreat to the living room with her phone, I couldn't help but smile. She had no idea just how messy things were about to become. The first crack in Naomi's façade appeared on Friday morning, courtesy of Morrison & Associates' HR department. I'd spent Thursday evening crafting an anonymous email to Lisa Morrow, the company's HR director. I'd found her contact information on the company website, along with a bio that emphasized her commitment to maintaining professional standards and workplace integrity. Perfect. The email was a masterpiece of concerned citizenship. Dear Ms. Morrow, I feel obligated to bring to your attention some concerning behavior I've observed between two of your employees, Naomi Bell and Ethan Shaw. As someone who cares about professional standards, I thought you should be aware that their working relationship appears to have crossed appropriate boundaries. I've witnessed inappropriate physical contact between them at several professional events, and their email communications, copies attached, suggest a personal relationship that may be affecting their professional judgment and creating an uncomfortable environment for other employees. I'm sending this anonymously because I don't want to get involved in office politics, but I believe these issues should be addressed before they escalate further. A concerned observer. I attached selected screenshots of the deleted emails I'd found on Naomi's laptop, the ones that were flirtatious but not explicit enough to be obviously stolen from a private account. To anyone reviewing them, they would look like standard workplace communications that had simply crossed a line. Friday morning, I was at my own office when my phone rang. Naomi's name flashed on the screen, and when I answered, her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Felix, something weird is happening at work," she said without preamble. "HR wants to see me this afternoon. They won't tell me what it's about, just that it's regarding professional conduct standards." "That's strange," I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. "Do you have any idea what it could be about?" "No, I can't think of anything, unless someone complained about the Hartwell project presentation. But that went really well. Everyone was happy with it." "I'm sure it's nothing serious," I told her. "Maybe just some routine policy review or training requirement." "Maybe," she said, but she didn't sound convinced. "Ethan got called in too, same time, separate meetings." "Well, that's probably good, right? If it was something specific to you, they wouldn't need to talk to him as well." There was a long pause before she responded. "Yeah, you're probably right. I hate not knowing what to expect." "You'll be fine," I assured her. "You're great at your job, you follow all the rules, and everyone likes working with you. Whatever this is about, I'm sure you'll handle it perfectly." After we hung up, I found myself grinning at my computer screen. Phase 1 was in motion. That evening, Naomi came home looking like she'd been hit by a truck. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged, and there were stress lines around her eyes I'd never seen before. "How did the HR meeting go?" I asked, looking up from the couch where I'd been waiting with takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant and a bottle of wine. She collapsed into the armchair across from me, not even acknowledging the food. "It was horrible, Felix. Someone sent HR screenshots of emails between me and Ethan, claiming we were having an inappropriate workplace relationship." "What? That's crazy. What kind of emails?" "Just normal work stuff, but someone was trying to make it sound like we were having an affair or something." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I had to admire her acting skills. "That's ridiculous," I said, standing up to pour her a glass of wine. "Anyone who knows you would know you'd never do something like that." She accepted the wine gratefully, taking a large sip before continuing. "HR is launching a full investigation. They're reviewing all our communications, interviewing other employees, the whole thing, and, until it's resolved, Ethan and I aren't allowed to work together unsupervised." "Wow, that seems like an overreaction." "That's what I said. But apparently the company has a zero-tolerance policy for workplace relationships, especially between employees who work closely together on client accounts. They're worried about liability issues and professional conflicts of interest." I sat back down, trying to look appropriately sympathetic while internally celebrating. "I'm sorry, babe. That must be really stressful, especially with the Hartwell project being so important. The worst part is, I have no idea who would do something like this. The emails were real. Ethan and I do email about work stuff all the time, but someone was deliberately trying to make them look inappropriate. Maybe it was someone who's jealous of your success with the project, or someone who wanted to undermine your chances for the promotion." Naomi's eyes lit up with the possibility of a different explanation. "You know, that actually makes sense. There are definitely people at the office who weren't happy when I got assigned to the Hartwell account. There you go. Probably just some office politics bullshit. Once HR realizes there's nothing actually inappropriate going on, this will all blow over." She smiled for the first time since she'd walked in the door. "You're right. I'm probably overreacting. It's just been such a weird day." We ate dinner while she vented about the unfairness of it all, how professional relationships were being misconstrued, how the investigation was going to slow down the Hartwell project timeline. I made all the appropriate supportive noises while mentally cataloging every lie and half-truth she told. The best part was when she showed me one of the email screenshots HR had received, asking if I thought it looked inappropriate. "Thanks for staying late to work on the presentation," I read aloud. "You're amazing at this stuff, and at making even the boring parts fun. Can't wait for tomorrow's site visit." I handed her phone back with a shrug. Sounds like normal work stuff to me. Maybe a little friendly, but nothing scandalous. What I didn't mention was that I'd deliberately chosen the most innocuous emails for the HR complaint. The really damaging evidence was still in my back pocket, waiting for the right moment. That night, as Naomi tossed and turned beside me, I stared at the ceiling and planned my next move. The HR investigation would keep them both on edge and limit their ability to coordinate their stories, but it was just the opening salvo. The real fun was about to begin. Saturday evening, I made my first appearance at the Ledger since the HR bomb had dropped. The usual crowd was there: Sarah the legal secretary, Mike the insurance adjuster, a rotating cast of office workers and service industry folks who treated the bar like their personal therapy session. I ordered my usual bourbon and settled into the conversation already in progress about workplace drama and office politics. "You want to know what's really crazy?" I said during a lull in the conversation. "My girlfriend's dealing with some serious office politics right now. Someone at her company is trying to make it look like she's having an affair with a coworker." "No shit?" Sarah leaned forward with interest. "What kind of evidence?" "Email screenshots, apparently. Someone sent them to HR claiming they proved inappropriate behavior, but when she showed me the messages, they just looked like normal work communications. Maybe a little friendly, but nothing over the line." "That's brutal," Mike said, shaking his head. "Office politics can get really nasty when there's money and promotions involved." "The thing is," I continued, taking a sip of bourbon, "I'm starting to wonder if maybe there's more to it than she's telling me." The bar went quiet. This was the kind of personal revelation that elevated casual conversation into premium gossip. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "Just little things, you know. She's been working late a lot, always texting with this guy, talking about him constantly. I trust her, but—" I let the sentence hang. "But your gut is telling you something's off," Mike finished. "Exactly. And the weird thing is, when I try to talk to her about it, she gets defensive, like really defensive. If it's just a work relationship, why not be completely transparent about it?" I spent the next hour playing the role of the concerned but loyal boyfriend, sharing just enough details to plant seeds of doubt while maintaining plausible deniability. By the time I left, I was confident that the story of Naomi Bell's suspicious workplace relationship would be making the rounds of Boston's professional gossip network within days. Phase 2 was officially underway. The beauty of a good revenge plan is that once you set it in motion, it starts to feed on itself. By Monday morning, the gossip I'd planted at the Ledger had already begun to spread through the interconnected web of Boston's white-collar social scene. Naomi's friend Monica called her during breakfast, ostensibly to check in about the HR investigation, but really to fish for details about the workplace relationship rumors she'd heard from her roommate, who worked at a law firm downtown. "I told her it was completely ridiculous," Naomi said into the phone, pacing around our kitchen while her coffee grew cold. "But you know how these things spread. By the time the story gets passed around a few times, people will be saying Ethan and I were caught having sex in the conference room." I looked up from my laptop with an expression of concern. "People are already talking about it outside your office?" She covered the phone with her hand. "Monica heard something at a networking event on Friday night. Apparently it's making the rounds." After she hung up, Naomi slumped into the chair across from me, looking defeated. "This is getting out of control, Felix. Even if HR clears us, the damage to my reputation is already done. You know how this industry works. Once people start questioning your professionalism, it follows you everywhere." "Maybe you should talk to a lawyer," I suggested. "If someone is deliberately spreading false information about you, that could be defamation." "With what evidence? I don't even know who sent those emails to HR in the first place." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "We'll figure it out. Maybe there's a way to trace where the emails came from, or find witnesses who can vouch for your professional conduct." She squeezed back, and for a moment I almost felt bad about what I was doing. Almost. That afternoon, I received an update from Janet, the private investigator. "Your girlfriend and her boyfriend are definitely feeling the pressure," she reported. "I followed them to a coffee shop yesterday afternoon, separate arrivals, sat at different tables, but they were clearly having an intense conversation, lots of gesturing, looking around nervously, classic behavior for people who think they're being watched." "Any idea what they were discussing?" I couldn't get close enough to hear specifics, but the body language suggested they were arguing about something. She looked upset. He looked frustrated. Whatever's going on at their workplace, it's definitely affecting their relationship. "Keep watching them. I have a feeling things are about to escalate." That evening, I implemented Phase 3 of my plan. I'd spent the weekend creating a series of anonymous social media accounts, complete with generic profile photos and carefully constructed posting histories that would make them look like real people. Using these accounts, I began seeding more detailed versions of the Naomi and Ethan story across various professional networking sites and local community groups. Nothing too explicit or obviously defamatory, just concerned observations about workplace professionalism and the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries in client-facing roles. I mentioned Morrison & Associates by name, praised the company's commitment to professional standards, and expressed confidence that they would handle the situation appropriately. The posts were designed to look like they came from clients or industry contacts who had observed inappropriate behavior at professional events. Each one included just enough specific details to be credible while remaining vague enough to avoid legal issues. By Tuesday morning, the story had taken on a life of its own. Naomi's phone started ringing before 7 a.m. First, it was her boss, asking if she'd seen the online chatter about the company. Then it was Claire, wanting to know if the rumors about her and some sales guy were true. Then it was her mother, who'd somehow heard about it from a neighbor whose daughter worked in Boston's financial district. "This is insane," Naomi said, staring at her phone after declining yet another call. "How is this spreading so fast?" "Social media," I said, looking up from my own phone where I was monitoring the spread of my handiwork. "Once something gets posted online, it can go viral in hours." "But I don't understand how random people even know about this. The HR investigation was supposed to be confidential." "Maybe someone at your office leaked it. Or maybe whoever sent the original complaint is still spreading information." Naomi's face darkened. If I find out who's behind this, I'm going to destroy them." The irony was almost too perfect to bear. That afternoon, while Naomi was at work dealing with the fallout, I made my first direct move against Ethan Shaw. I'd been monitoring his social media accounts and noticed that he was scheduled to attend a client presentation at 3 p.m. Using one of my anonymous email accounts, I sent a message to the client company's procurement director. "Dear Mr. Johnson, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to reach out regarding your upcoming meeting with Morrison & Associates, specifically with their sales representative, Ethan Shaw. As someone who has worked with Morrison in the past, I feel obligated to inform you that Mr. Shaw is currently under investigation by his company's HR department for inappropriate workplace conduct. While I don't have all the details, I understand it involves a relationship with a female colleague that may have affected his professional judgment on client accounts. I'm not suggesting you cancel your meeting, but I thought you should be aware of the situation in case it affects your decision-making process. Professional integrity is so important in our industry, and I believe clients deserve to work with representatives who maintain the highest standards. Best regards, a former Morrison client." I sent similar messages to 3 other clients Ethan was scheduled to meet with over the next week, each one carefully crafted to sound like a concerned business contact rather than a malicious attack. The results were immediate and devastating. By Thursday, Ethan had been removed from all client-facing activities pending the completion of the HR investigation. According to Janet's surveillance reports, he'd been called into his manager's office twice that week and was seen having heated conversations with colleagues in the parking garage. More importantly, the pressure was starting to affect his relationship with Naomi. "They're definitely fighting," Janet reported during our weekly check-in. "I observed them at that Italian restaurant again on Tuesday night, and it did not look like a romantic dinner. She was crying, he was gesturing angrily, and they left separately. Yesterday, I saw him waiting outside her office building, but she walked right past him without stopping. Trouble in paradise. More like trouble in purgatory. These two are realizing that their little affair has turned into a career-ending nightmare, and they're starting to turn on each other." Perfect. Phase 4 could begin. Friday evening, Naomi came home with red eyes and a box of tissues, looking like she'd been crying on and off all day. "Bad day?" I asked, though the answer was obvious. "The worst," she said, collapsing onto the couch. "HR called me in again today. They've received additional complaints about my conduct, including some from clients. Felix, I think I'm going to lose my job." I sat down beside her and pulled her into a hug, letting her cry against my shoulder while I mentally celebrated another successful phase of the plan. "What kind of complaints?" I asked. They wouldn't give me specifics, but apparently multiple people have contacted the company expressing concerns about my professionalism and judgment, and the Hartwell account is being reassigned to another team because the client is uncomfortable with the current situation. "That's horrible. Can't you fight this somehow? Get a lawyer or file a grievance?" "With what evidence? I can't prove I didn't do anything wrong, and even if I could, my reputation is already destroyed. No one in this industry is going to want to work with someone who's been involved in this kind of scandal." She pulled back to look at me, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Felix, I need to tell you something. About Ethan." Here it comes, I thought. the confession that would give me everything I needed for the final phase. We did get close while working on the Hartwell project, closer than we should have. I never meant for it to happen, and it didn't go as far as people are saying, but she took a shaky breath. I developed feelings for him, and I think he felt the same way. Naomi, I never cheated on you, I swear. We never slept together or anything like that. But there were emails and dinners and conversations that crossed the line. I was confused about what I wanted, and I handled it terribly. I stared at her for a long moment, letting the silence stretch between us. When I finally spoke, my voice was carefully controlled. So when you were telling me about your work husband and your late nights and your innocent colleague relationships, you were lying to me. Not lying exactly, but not being completely honest either. For how long? A few months, since we started working together closely. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where we'd walked together so many times, where we'd talked about our future and made plans that apparently meant nothing to her. I need some time to think about this, I said without turning around. Felix, please. I know I messed up, but I want to fix this. I want to fix us. Do you? Or do you just want to fix the situation because your other option didn't work out? The question hung in the air between us, and her silence was all the answer I needed. I'm going to stay at Jamie's tonight, I said, finally turning back to face her. We can talk more when I've had time to process this. As I packed an overnight bag, Naomi sat on the bed, watching me with tears streaming down her face. I love you, she said as I headed for the door. I know I screwed everything up, but I do love you. I love you too, I replied, and meant it. That's what makes this so much worse. I left her there crying and drove to my best friend Jamie's apartment with a sense of satisfaction that surprised me with its intensity. The confession was exactly what I'd needed to justify the final phase of my plan. The gloves were officially coming off. Jamie Martinez had been my closest friend since college, a fellow numbers geek who worked as a data analyst for a tech startup and shared my appreciation for strategic thinking and well-executed plans. When I showed up at his apartment Friday night with a bottle of good whiskey and a story about needing a place to crash, he didn't ask too many questions. It wasn't until Saturday morning, over coffee and bagels, that I laid out the whole situation for him. Holy shit, Felix, he said when I finished explaining everything from the initial discovery to Naomi's confession the night before. You've been planning this for weeks? Months, technically. I started documenting everything as soon as I suspected something was going on. And she has no idea you're behind all the HR complaints and social media stuff? None whatsoever. As far as she knows, I'm the supportive boyfriend who's trying to help her figure out who's sabotaging her career. Jamie leaned back in his chair, studying me with a mixture of admiration and concern. I have to ask, man, don't you think this is a little extreme? I mean, she confessed and apologized. Maybe you could work things out? She confessed to an emotional affair after her reputation was already destroyed and her job was in jeopardy. That's not the same as coming clean because she felt guilty about betraying me. Fair point. So what's the end game here? You've already basically ended her career and her relationship with this Ethan guy. I pulled out my phone and showed him the latest surveillance photos Janet had sent me. Ethan and Naomi in what was clearly a heated argument outside Morrison and Associates, both of them looking haggard and desperate. The endgame is complete exposure. I want everyone who matters to them to know exactly what they did and who they really are. No more hiding behind professional courtesy or plausible deniability. And then what? You get back together with her? No. Then I move on with my life, knowing that justice was served. Jamie was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of what I was planning. All right, he said finally. What do you need me to do? That afternoon, we implemented the final phase of the plan. Morrison and Associates was hosting their annual client appreciation event at a rooftop venue downtown, a fancy affair with an open bar, catered appetizers, and a guest list that included most of the city's professional elite. According to the company website, it was their biggest networking event of the year, designed to strengthen relationships with existing clients and attract new business. Jamie had a legitimate invitation through his company's partnership with Morrison on a recent project, and he was allowed to bring a guest. That guest would be me. I spent Saturday afternoon shopping for the occasion, buying a new suit that made me look more successful than a forensic accountant typically did, and preparing the materials that would turn Morrison's celebration into Naomi and Ethan's public reckoning. The evidence package I assembled was comprehensive and devastating. Printed copies of the most damaging email exchanges, including the deleted messages about complications and worth it, screenshots of text message summaries showing the frequency and timing of their communications, Janet's surveillance photos with timestamps and location data, credit card statements showing Naomi's charges at romantic restaurants during times when she claimed to be working late. A detailed timeline correlating Naomi's lies to me with her documented activities with Ethan. I had 50 copies printed at a professional service, each one bound in a clear plastic cover with a title page that read, Professional Conduct Review, Naomi Bell and Ethan Shaw, a case study in workplace ethics violations. Sunday evening, Jamie and I arrived at the rooftop event fashionably late, when the party was in full swing and most of the guests had had at least one drink. The venue was perfect for my purposes. An open space with multiple conversation areas, a central bar, and excellent acoustics that would carry voices across the entire floor. I spotted Naomi immediately, wearing a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before and talking animatedly with a group of clients near the bar. She looked beautiful and confident, playing the role of the successful professional networking with ease. For a moment, I almost felt bad about what I was about to do. Almost. Ethan was on the other side of the room, surrounded by his own group of colleagues and clients. He was wearing an expensive-looking suit and his practiced sales smile, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept darting around the room. "You sure about this?" Jamie asked as we approached the bar. "Absolutely." I ordered a bourbon and spent the first hour of the party mingling, introducing myself to people as Jamie's friend and business associate, establishing myself as someone who belonged in this crowd. I was charming and professional, asking thoughtful questions about people's work and sharing amusing stories about the forensic accounting business. By the time I was ready to make my move, I'd identified the key players in the room: Morrison's senior partners, major clients, influential members of the professional community, and the social connectors who would ensure that whatever happened tonight would be discussed in offices across the city by Monday morning. The opening came when Naomi approached the bar to refresh her drink. She saw me before I saw her, and her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, and then a forced smile. "Felix, what are you doing here?" "Jamie invited me," I said, gesturing to where my friend was chatting with a group of tech executives. "I didn't realize this was your company's event." "Oh, well, it's nice to see you." She glanced around nervously. How are you doing? After our conversation Friday night?" "I'm great, actually. Really great. In fact, I have something I wanted to share with everyone here." Before she could respond, I stepped away from the bar and raised my voice to address the room. "Excuse me, everyone. Could I have your attention for just a moment?" The conversations gradually died down as people turned to look at me. I could see Naomi's face go pale, and across the room, Ethan had stopped mid-sentence in whatever story he was telling. "I know this is a celebration of Morrison and Associates and their commitment to professional excellence," I continued, "but I think it's important that we also celebrate honesty and integrity in our business relationships." I reached into my jacket and pulled out one of the evidence packets. Which is why I wanted to share with all of you a fascinating case study in how personal relationships can compromise professional judgment and ethical standards. "Felix, don't," Naomi said, but her voice was barely a whisper. "This is the story of two Morrison and Associates employees who thought they could conduct a secret affair while working together on client accounts, lying to their colleagues, their clients, and their personal partners about the nature of their relationship." I began distributing the packets to the people closest to me, who immediately started flipping through the pages with fascination. You'll find email exchanges discussing their complications and how some things are worth it, surveillance photos of romantic dinners during supposed work meetings, and a detailed timeline of lies and deceptions that would make any HR department cringe. The room had gone completely silent, except for the rustling of papers as people examined the evidence. I could see Morrison's senior partners huddled together, their faces grim as they reviewed the materials. "The most interesting part," I continued, "is how they tried to cover their tracks when they got caught, blaming anonymous whistleblowers and office politics instead of taking responsibility for their own choices." Ethan had started pushing through the crowd toward me, his face red with anger. "You son of a jerk," he snarled when he reached me. "You did this. You're the one who's been sabotaging us." "I didn't sabotage anything," I replied calmly. "I just documented what you were already doing." He took a swing at me, but I'd been expecting it, and stepped aside easily. His momentum carried him into a cocktail table, sending drinks and appetizers crashing to the floor. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs as several people moved to restrain Ethan, who was now shouting about lawsuits and defamation while trying to gather up the scattered evidence packets. "This is all lies," Naomi said, her voice shaking. "He's my ex-boyfriend. He's just trying to get revenge because I broke up with him." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "I have audio recordings of your confession from Friday night. where you admitted to the emotional affair and months of lying. Would you like me to play that for everyone too? The fight went out of her then. She stood there in her black dress, surrounded by colleagues and clients and professional contacts, looking small and defeated and completely exposed. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, addressing the room one final time, "I present to you Naomi Bell and Ethan Shaw, a cautionary tale about what happens when personal integrity takes a back seat to selfish desires." I finished my bourbon, set the glass on the bar, and walked toward the exit with Jamie beside me. "Felix," Naomi called after me, but I didn't turn around. "The numbers don't lie, Naomi," I said without looking back. "They never do." As we waited for the elevator, I could hear the chaos continuing behind us. Raised voices, heated discussions, and the unmistakable sound of two careers imploding in real time. "Jesus Christ," Jamie said as the elevator doors closed. "That was brutal." "That was justice," I corrected him. By Monday morning, the video of Ethan's attempted assault and Naomi's public meltdown had been posted to multiple social media platforms. The evidence packets had been photographed and shared across professional networks. Morrison and Associates issued a statement announcing the immediate termination of both employees for serious violations of company policy and professional conduct standards. Naomi left 3 voicemails on my phone that day, each one more desperate than the last. I deleted them without listening to the full messages. Ethan Shaw's LinkedIn profile disappeared entirely, and according to my sources in the professional community, he'd left Boston and was reportedly looking for work in another state. The Hartwell Industries account, which had started this whole mess, ended up being handled by a different firm entirely after Morrison's reputation took a significant hit from the scandal. I moved out of our shared apartment the following weekend, taking only what belonged to me and leaving no forwarding address. I found a new place across town, a clean slate where I could start over without the constant reminders of betrayal and lies. 3 months later, I was having drinks at the Ledger when Sarah, the legal secretary, brought up the Morrison and Associates scandal. "Whatever happened to that girl whose boyfriend exposed her affair at that fancy party?" she asked. "That was the most dramatic breakup I've ever heard of." "Last I heard, she moved back in with her parents," Mike replied. "Couldn't find another job in the city after that whole thing went viral." "And the guy?" "Gone. Completely disappeared from the professional scene here." I sipped my bourbon and smiled. "Funny thing about numbers," I said. "They always add up, and when they finally balance out, justice gets served." Sarah raised her glass. "To getting what you deserve." "To getting what you deserve," I agreed. And as I looked around the bar at the familiar faces of people who'd watched the whole drama unfold, who'd seen justice delivered in real time, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Complete satisfaction. The numbers had finally made sense. Checkmate.